Good evening, TheoTrade. This is Corey Rosenblum, and you're watching the Theo Nightly Video for the 29th of September here in 2022. As we're ending out the month of September, it is another sell-side activity or a sell-side day. Biggest decliners in the futures market were, or is, the NASDAQ. That was down at one point greater than 3%, but so was the Russell. Russell, of course, is our small cap index. NASDAQ is our technology-centric index. Other things we'll talk about in tonight's video, it's going to be the calendar for tomorrow. And on tomorrow's session, a few things to highlight. That would be consumer sentiment would take place tomorrow morning. And we're also going to have another report on the PMI, Purchasing Managers Index. And of course, some of the big ones is going to be PMI, personal income, and the other CPE. We're looking at more inflationary data about what the trends are, what the reports say, and how the market perceives and interprets those. But we'll get to that just in a moment. On the bigger picture, we're going to continue to take a look at the daily chart and keep in mind the small time frame, small being daily, which we're at new lows. Again, one of the headlines you'll probably see in the financial media in tonight, in the news and across the information world, is that the equity market made new lows, probing and pushing under the lows. Of course, we see these in June, but also the most recent lows. So that is another 52-week low for the S&P. The NASDAQ is right there as well. The Dow mini futures, the Dow Jones, that pierced those lows. We're looking at 29,000, and the Russell as well. A quick perspective on some of the sectors, and the financial sector, again, that's your broader XLF, that's off there at lows. But again, as we're looking at the daily chart, which sees the market any potential, we call that risk reversal, just a bounce, not the end of the bear market, not the end of the recession, not the end of the movement, but what we might consider a reflexive bounce. In other words, even though the market's at lows, it is too late to get short right now. The risk is for a bounce. It may not be all the way up. It could be just to 4,000. But as we're going into October, this is the risk of the market blowing to the upside or playing to the upside or rallying to the upside, and versus the reward of additional downside movement. That's the theme. And of course, that perspective, if you are getting a little too bullish on the daily chart with the market at these chart lows, just take a moment to step over into the weekly chart and to see that there is plenty of more room for the market to fall in the event, in the future, in October and later, that we see the indices beneath their key pivot points being 3,600 in the S&P futures, 11,000 in the Dow mini futures, in the NASDAQ mini futures, now talking the Dow, 29,000 in the Dow, and that Russell is about 1650, we'll just say to be a little imprecise, but on the point, about 1600 in the Russell. Outside of equity futures, crude, and that is one of the inflationary products or inflationary markets, has seen a continued decline throughout June to present. So that is in focus. At the same time, we're seeing gold make its new lows right there with the equity market, and to an extent, the crude oil. Again, think about the high in the earlier part of the year, the second high into May and June, and then the decline from there. Gold has had that similar double top, or at least a peak at the earlier part, a retest just above 2,000, and now it's at the bottom of its 2022 price chart. Right with it is the bond market, which continues to press new lows. And again, looking back at the weekly perspective, there isn't a lot of room beneath the market on the weekly chart, but that doesn't mean it can't go lower. TLT is into 100 per share, and again, that is an ETF. The bond market itself, ZN, the 10-year Treasury note, that's about 1,100 on the index or on the futures product, and ZB trades at the 123. Again, daily on the left, weekly on the right. In today's session, the biggest decliner was the NASDAQ, and that was in part because of some leading technology stocks that were on the sell side in today's session. Just looking at the S&P 100 and which stocks declined the most in today's session, Tesla was number one, down about 7%. Notice that it is not making new lows for the year. Boeing is not far. Boeing was down 6%. But some of the car manufacturers, looking at Ford, it was down and is close to its lows. It was down 5, almost 6%. Right there with it in a very similar chart is General Motors. Behind that would be Walgreens Boots Alliance and the big one, the biggest market cap stock in the indices. That's Apple. And Apple has traded from its 175 range high, just shy of its peak earlier in 180. It is back to range support lows into the 140 per share. Now, Apple is in more of a sideways trading range as opposed to a downtrend, as we might be seeing in other stocks such as Ford and, of course, the indices themselves. So there is Apple on its weekly chart and the daily chart, and many other stocks are seeing these similar large declines. Now, while we're on the focus of the stock market, just another note of which stocks led the market to new 52-week lows. This list is somewhat continuous or somewhat repetitive, but that's the point of the scan. Stocks that are making new 52-week lows are on the leading edge of the sell side activity. They are hitting lows and they are, or should be, expected to continue making 52-week lows. These would include 110 names in the S&P 500. And just a quick look at those, again, daily on the left, weekly on the right. Microsoft. We'll pull these trend lines off to see how we can see the perspective on Microsoft. Daily chart making new lows. And these new lows, because they are in the scan, they're lows not seen in 52 weeks or in a trading year. And in fact, the last time Microsoft traded in this level, it was back in April or May of 2021. Behind that is Alphabet, Google. Behind it is a financial company, JP Morgan Chase. Remember, the broader XLF is at those lows as well. Procter & Gamble. Back to some of the technology names in NVIDIA, Broadcom. We'll look at Oracle and then Verizon off of the lows as well. Nike, and let's take a pause on Nike just for one moment, because Nike had earnings after the bell today. So we won't go into that just for sake of brevity here in the video, but let's take a look quickly at the daily chart, which is down to about 95 per share, a new 52-week low. But what happened in the earnings aftermath or the after hours? And to do that, just go to equities. You could do show extended trading hours, and we'll apply that. And the share price for Nike is down currently at the moment after during the conference call, and of course after the earnings. The shares trade at 89 per share, so they are down after hours, after the bell on their earnings. That will be something to watch into tomorrow's session. That would put the shares of Nike currently, this could change after the video, down into the 90 per share. So all things being equal, at the morning open on Friday, Nike could be trading down to these levels, making new 52-week lows. And a few others would include Qualcomm. We'll go back to the weekly chart here. Qualcomm. There's AT&T and Intel, and we'll leave it there just to take a look at some of those market cap names, leadership, and sorted by how big they are. Intel continues to make those new lows. So in tomorrow's session, as we're going to go through the end of September and into October, we'll have additional data on the economic situation. So these will be available to see and to check. That would be consumer sentiment. And we can always take a look at the previous, the expected, what the financial report is, what the description is, why it could be a market mover, and of course the PMI, the Producers Price Index, that will take place before the market in tomorrow's session. So as always, be careful, always be safe, keep these bigger pictures in mind. Even on the daily chart, there are pictures and viewpoints and perspectives in play We still have inflation as a concern. The dollar is pulling back from its high. The bond market declined just a little bit in today's session, and we'll always be watching this TNX, which is the yield. Although it's pulled back, it was a little bit slightly up on today's session, and everything else within the equity market, as equity prices in the S&P at least, did make those new lows. As always, be careful and safe. This is Corey Rosenblum with tonight's Theo video update for September 29th, 2022.